it's Christina. Welcome again to my booktube, Christina's Goblet of Books. Today we are actually going to be talking about my book club. So I have, as I mentioned in a previous video, a book club with two of my best friends, Logan and Danielle. And we used to do one book every month when we first started about 2 years ago. And then after a little while, it got to be a little too much and we felt like we couldn't really read other books that we wanted to read for fun because we were so focused on trying to get that book club book done. So then we changed it to once every 6 weeks, so about once a month. So today what I'll be doing is actually sharing with you the books that we've read so far for book club. There's about 16 of them. And I'll be giving you what reviews I gave them, so how many stars, and a little overview of some of them. So I guess let's get started. And if at any time you think, oh, I read that book, or I wanted to read that book, feel free to, comment in the comments below, and I can always respond to you at what, more about what I thought, or any other questions that you have about the books. So first we read Wonder. I don't have the book with me because I actually did it on my Nook, but that is Wonder by RJ Palacio, and I gave that one 5 out of 5. That book just warmed my heart, and I laughed, I cried, I loved it so much. That one we started to want to read it was because the movie was actually coming out pretty shortly, and we saw the trailer and then found out it was a book, so we were like, okay, well then we totally have to read it. So that one, if you don't know, is about a boy who looks different facially. He's had multiple surgeries since birth, so he looks different than a lot of the other kids that he is going to be going to school with. He was homeschooled, and then in 5th grade he decided that, I really want to go to public school and make some friends. So his parents really don't want him to, but then decide, have to let him do what he wants to do. So he goes to school and encounters some bullies and some kids that are just, really mean and staring at him and making mean comments about him. But he ends up really developing a relationship with 1 or 2 kids who mean a lot to him. And throughout the whole, movie and the whole story of the book, it's really talking about how he overcomes all of this, and there's little plots in between about his sister and his family and things like that. But overall, it's just so sweet. And if you were looking for a quick read that's easy, you don't have to really think super hard about it. It's just pretty cut and dry, in not dry in a sense of being, hard to read. Like I said, just really easy, and you can just honestly devour that book in probably a night. So that was the first book, and I think overall we all really loved it, but after that we were kind of ready for a challenge. So also the way that our book club worked is the first book we chose all together, but then after that we all made a list of 5 books we wanted to read and started putting those books in and pretty much like pulling out of a hat, so it would be random, and so it would be fair that, my book wasn't getting chosen every single month, and or Logan's or Danielle's, so we did it at random. So next we did Handmaid's Tale. This actually has been super popular recently because the show coming out, and now Margaret Atwood is going to be doing a sequel, which I think is coming out in October, so that's super exciting. And this one is really a dystopian novel about women just losing all of the power that they had, so they're not allowed to pretty much do anything unless a man pretty much says they're allowed to. So it's really scary to think about that, and it goes following Offred, so she's the main character, and it follows her through all of her stories, but then other stories get intertwined, which is really excellent. And it's really about her fight of trying to get out of this and figure out why it's like that. And part of the reason why you find out is because there's pollution, and other people are sterile, so they want to, I guess, utilize the women who are able to have babies still. So that book kind of was a little confusing in the beginning, but once you get towards the end, everything gets tied together, and it's actually really excellent, and actually something that I kind of want to read again now that I really know more about it. So that one also I read on my notes, that's why I don't have the book in front of me. But the third book we read was The Night Circus, which I do have in front of me. As you can see, I have all these little notes. So this book honestly was, I think, one of the books that we didn't really like, none of us. There were really beautiful descriptions in the book, so talking about like the tents and the circus, and I wonder if I can, I'm sure I flagged one. Yeah, so for example, this says, your curiosity got the better of you as is wont to do. You stand in the fading light, the scarf around your neck, pulled up against the chilly evening breeze, waiting to see for yourself exactly what kind of circus only opens once the sun sets. So that's right in the beginning, but throughout the book it does have some really beautiful descriptions, and it makes you feel like you're there, which is really nice, and I love when that happens because it makes you feel like you're more invested into the story because it feels like you're in there. The issue with that book, though, is that I felt like once the end happened, I still didn't understand what happened. So I don't want to do any spoilers, but it's about two magicians who you find out are dueling because of their parents, and you find out that one of them is only going to make it. So through all the dueling and all of these challenges that they have to do, only one of them is allowed to win the game, which meaning come out alive. So it had so much just confusion in and out. Like, I was having a really hard time understanding what this character was doing and what this character was doing and how it all intertwined, and it was just a little muddy for me. And I think it had more potential, but that was one that we all didn't really like. That one I rated 2 out of 5. Also, I forgot to mention for Handmaid's Tale, I rated it 4 out of 5. So the next book that we read was Game of Thrones, the first book, which I have here. And I made a few funny notes. This book was good, but also took me some time to be able to read it. Like, there were so many questions I had, and I was tagging, like, Ned Stark, is he Ed ? And Robert Baratheon, he's of the South ? Like, I feel like some of the things, some of the names and all of the characters just kind of got muddy for me as well, but I did actually enjoy it. I rated it a 3 out of 5. The cliffhanger that was at the end was really good for me, and I really fell in love with Arya Stark and also with Daenerys, which honestly, those two characters are the reason why I decided I wanted to continue that series. I wasn't really into the whole, like, this one wants to be king, but this one wants to, and this one is betraying this one. And I just think that the book, there was so much in it that it was a little hard to grasp everything at once. But I'm actually in the middle of reading the second one, and I'm just kind of reading it on my own time so I don't burn myself out and end up not liking it and not wanting to continue the series. So next one that we read was When Dimple Met Rishi. I rated that one 5 out of 5. This one is similar type of read to Wonder. So it's a really, like, cutesy, very funny, makes you have all the feels type of book. And this one is about an Indian girl who is going to be going to college, and her parents just keep saying, oh, we want you to get married to an Indian man, follow tradition, and they just really want her to get married soon. And she doesn't want to right away. She's like, well, actually, I'm going to college and I want to focus on my studies, but her parents think otherwise. So they end up meeting with another family behind her back and find out that their son, who's the same age, is going to the same summer program for the college that she's going to. So they tell him basically, we want you guys to get married, so make her fall in love with you and woo her while you're at the program, but don't tell her that we told you to do this because then she's not gonna even give you a shot. So that book, like I said before, made me laugh so much, and you really are. So for When Dimple Met Rishi, like I said before, this one just had me laughing and was so cute, and you're really rooting for them as a couple and you really want them to make it, but at the same time, you know that Dimple really wasn't trying to do that. That's not what she wanted, but she ends up falling into it, and there's a little bit of conflict obviously at one part, and it just ends up being so sweet. So if you want another read that is just really short, sweet, and easy to read and you can devour in like a night, that's definitely a book that I would recommend. So the next book that we read was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which I gave a 4 out of 5, and this is what my copy looked like. So this book, similar to Handmaid's Tale, I really had to pay attention a little bit more than I had to for like When Dimple Met Rishi and a few of the other books that were easier reads. This one, it's more of like, not necessarily classic, but it is, one of those books that they have you read in school, which I never read in high school, but we decided to read it for book club. And I did flag a few things with like a question mark. And, the good thing about book club is when you have a question mark on certain parts, you can talk to your book club about it and they can explain it to you. So it's really nice to group read things, because what one doesn't understand, the other one does, and everyone can kind of loop into the conversation of their own views, and it helps you understand probably the whole book a little bit more anyway. That one, like I said, I gave it a 4 out of 5. This one is a troublemaker who gets sent to a state mental hospital, and he is just putting everything upside down, making everyone laugh, doing jokes, and before everyone's walking around, like, very sad, and there's a routine that the nurse has, and he ends up being friends with Chief Bromden, and it's just really, really a great read, but it really does also take time for you to be able to understand everything that's happening. So the next one we read, I read on my notes, I don't have the book in front of me, but it is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I rated this a 3 out of 5. This is another one of those books that is a classic that I really did like at the end after I read the whole thing, but it just took me some time to even understand what was happening. I think it was the language that I wasn't really used to, and you start to kind of feel like you're going mad, almost like Victor Frankenstein during the book, and you also start to kind of feel bad about the creature that he created, because the creature doesn't even want to be here, and it's not his fault that he was created, and he's demanding a few things of Victor Frankenstein and basically making the creature look like the bad guy. So it was overall a good book, but wasn't one of my favorites. So really that's pretty much all I have to say about that one. So next book that we did was The Hate U Give. This one I gave a 5 out of 5. If I could give this like a million out of 5, I would. This is probably one of my favorite books we've read in book club, and favorite books that I've read so far. So I have the book here. I actually have the Barnes & Noble collector's edition, and I've flagged a few different things here, because it's just things that this whole book really gets your heart, just in the feels, but at the same time, it's just, that these things happen. These things happen in real life, and it's, it makes you really sad. This one, it's a high schooler named Star. She goes to a party with some of her friends from her neighborhood. She generally was doing it on the weekend because she goes to a private school during the week and really hangs out with pretty much what she calls like her white friends, because they're a more prestigious private school, and she feels like she can't be herself there. So on the weekend she would go with her friends in her neighborhood, and they go to a party and they hear gunshots. So a friend that she had been friends with since she was a younger younger, ends up saying, you know, I want to take you home, I want you to be safe, let's go. So they get in the car and they're driving home, and you know, they're joking around. He's talking about how much he used to love her and all of this stuff, and she's, you know, she's a boyfriend, whatever. And he gets pulled over by a policeman and unfortunately is shot. And you know, police brutality happens every day, and when you find out you know, what he was reaching for in the car, which made the cop nervous, I don't want to ruin it, but when you find out what he was actually reaching for, obviously it wasn't a gun. You know, it's just so sad that another innocent life had been lost, and she has now seen him pass away from police brutality, and also saw another best friend years ago pass from gang violence. So she is just a wreck and doesn't really want to talk about it, but then she finds out that the policeman who shot her friend did not, or it might not even get any consequences for it. So this story is really about her finding her voice and wanting to fight for him, and it's so beautiful, you know, feeling all of her feelings through the process. Honestly, I can't say enough about this book. It really is one of my favorite books, and I think everyone should have to read this book, just like everyone has to read Frankenstein in school. I think that this should be something that everyone should read, because it really does dig down into what's happening today around us. So the next book that we read was Into the Water, and it's this by Paula Hawkins. And this book, I think I also did like question marks, and I don't know. This one, I rated 3 out of 5. I was really actually disappointed because this book is the same author that wrote Girl on the Train, which I devoured. Like, I read that within a day or two, and then I had to go see the movie. I made my best friend to go see the movie, and I could not stop raving about it. It was so good. But now with this book, actually, it was, like I said, super disappointing. There was really no character development. There were too many characters coming in and out and in and out, and you couldn't grasp anything about each character because you were always learning about a new one. And some of them honestly didn't even need to be in the story. Like, they did not bring anything to the story that they needed to be in it. I also felt like there wasn't really like clarity at the end about what actually happened. So this one is about two sisters who they're kind of don't talk as much, and they don't even live in the same town anymore. Nell lives in their hometown. Jules has since moved away. Nell has a daughter, Jules does not. She finds out that her sister Nell has passed away, and they're not sure if it was a murder, if it was a suicide. So Jules goes back to her hometown, even though she doesn't want to, and tries to take care of her niece and dive into what really happened. So there's stories about other women who have been killed or have committed suicide around water in that town. So they think it's that, and it's just a whole story about how did Nell die, why, who did it, and all of this. And like I said, there's just so many characters that coupled in, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what is even happening right now? And like I said at the end, you honestly don't really even find out everything that happened. So I was really disappointed with this one. I think most of the book club was pretty disappointed with this one. So I guess maybe we'll read more Paul Hawkins books, I'm not sure, but we'll see what happens. So the next book we did was, I rated 5 out of 5, and most people in book club really loved it. It was Kristin Hanna's The Nightingale. So this book was also one of my favorite books that we read this past year for book club. This one is historical fiction. It's about two sisters and living in France, and they are kind of living two different lives. Like they're still close, but one of them is more of a rebel, and the other one has a husband, a child, and they are starting to realize that World War II is about to happen. And once they see Nazis all over into France, and then it's really the story of how the two sisters come together and try to protect each other. The sister who is a wife, her husband goes to war, so she has to take care of her child, and also when her sister comes, she wants to take care of her too, because she's only about 18. And both of them are so strong. The one sister deals with a lot of things that she does not want to deal with to protect her family, and the other sister starts to become part of the resistance and really risking her life almost every day to fight the Nazis. So this book, it is just so good, and you find out so many different things about them, and such beautiful character development, and everything at the end really ties all together, which doesn't happen a lot of the times, I feel, and which is why like I said, some of the books I read like a 2 or 3 out of 5. This one, everything pieces together, and it is just stunning and so beautiful, and I would recommend, if anyone likes historical fiction or books about World War II, to read this one. So the next one we read was What Should Be Wild. This one I rated 2 out of 5. I read it on my Nook. This one I honestly don't have much to say about it, because it was just not good. Like, I mean, there are books that I've DNF'd one book because I just couldn't finish it. This one I had to finish. Obviously, in book club we always finish the book no matter how much we like it or not. But this one I would have put down like right away if I could have. I don't know what it is, but there once again was no character development, and the plot was super confusing. Like, I honestly can't even explain like what happened. If you're interested in this book, I would say read the summary of the book first before you try and dive into it, because for me it just wasn't it, and for most of book club it just really wasn't it. No one really liked it, so that's really all I have to say about that one. The next book we read was A Clockwork Orange, which I do have the book. This book is, again, one of those classics that you end up reading in high school. It's fiction. It's by Anthony Burgess. This book, I thought I was going to hate it so much. I started reading it and I was like, oh my god, this sounds like it would have been a good book, but I cannot deal with this. This one, I had my whole notebook of the language. So, it's about a teenager who is always wreaking havoc, and him and his friends are always just, doing a bunch of things that nobody should really be doing. There's sexual assault in it. They're just committing crimes, and they are doing drugs, and it is just, they're not good. They're not good eggs. So you follow them and end up realizing that the main character, Alex, goes to prison, and they decide they're going to use him as an example, and they're going to use shock therapy on him. And they start, you find out that he really loves classical music, so they start taking the music that he loves and basically putting it with the shock therapy. So every time he hears it, he gets these, oh my gosh, it's just so sad when you read everything that they're doing to him. The language that they come up with is really challenging in the beginning, but I feel like once I was maybe a third of the way through, I pretty much had most of the language down, and a lot of it was easy, like with context clues, and you'll see I actually have in my notebook like a whole vocabulary. So every time I finally figured out what a word was, I would write it down and then put check marks and say, yep, that's definitely what it is, if I had a question mark next to it. So it was a really challenging read, but I ended up actually really loving it. So that one, I'm not sure, I can't remember if I said it, but I rated it 4 out of 5. So 4 more books that we've read for book club. So the next one was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This book was fantastic. I rated this one a 5 out of 5 as well. This one is really like science fiction-y. It's a professor slash scientist who wanted to be this like breakthrough scientist, but ended up becoming a professor, has a wife, has a kid, and he one day is kidnapped going to meet a friend, and you find out that there's these multiple dimensions and different worlds almost that there's duplicates of him in, and it's so crazy because he thinks he sees his wife, but she has no idea who he is in one of the dimensions, and it's like his life playing out in a million different ways, and he has to try and get out of these dimensions to get back to his family, and it is so crazy. Like, and I feel like it made me, not like it made me smarter, but like I honestly didn't understand at first what like it meant to have multiple dimensions and how he could be a different person in each one. But it's really fantastic, and I would definitely recommend it if that's something that you are into. So next book we read was Gone Girl, which I also have the book of that one. This one, Gillian Flynn, this one was okay. It wasn't something that I really loved, so I did a 3 out of 5. This one is about a couple who moves to Missouri, and one day, near the anniversary, the wife goes missing, and the husband, everyone thinks he did it, everyone thinks he killed her, they're trying to blame him for it, and this story at first was like, oh wow, this is really good. But then you find out some crazy stuff about the wife, and it is just too much for me. I think most of us in book club were kind of like, what is happening here? You find out that there's different clues set by the wife that the husband has to try and find. It is just wild. I don't want to give away too much, but this book, it was, it had you in it for a while, but after a bit you're like, oh my god, both of these people are crazy, everyone in this book is crazy, and I like don't want to be a part of it. So if something like that is actually what you're into, then that's perfectly fine. It's just, for me personally, it was just not really my cup of tea. So next book was The Other Boleyn Girl. I rated this also a 3 out of 5. It's by Philippa Gregory. I thought that I might actually really like this book because kind of similar to Game of Thrones, similar language and similar writing. This one talks about Anne Boleyn and Mary Boleyn, and there was a lot of weird like sexual scenes and things that were not really, like I said, my cup of tea. I feel like some of it kind of went too far. It was a little weird, but I think it's also just that's how it was then in those times. So, trying to get ahead and trying to get with the king so your family can be wealthy and be taken care of. Like, I get it. That was kind of how that was then, but still kind of a little weird for me. I had a really hard time getting through this book. After a while, I was just like, oh my gosh, why is this part here? And can we, move on? What actually happens? I feel like it was kind of drawn out a little bit. Overall, it wasn't bad, but it's not, I found out that type of book is just not really my type of genre to be reading. So the last book that we've read so far for book club is called I See You by Claire McIntosh, which on my bookstagram you've probably seen I was reading. So this is the book that I just finished last week for book club. Book club is this Friday, the 16th. I am so excited to talk about this book. I really like this book. I don't want to give too much of a review yet because I'll give a more extended review at the end of the month when I do a video of all the books I read in August. Also, because since book club is until the 16th and I am going to be posting this video before then, I kind of want to save all of that and my reviews and whatnot for that book for book club, and then, like I said, I'll share a more in-depth review once book club is over, and maybe I'll record some of us talking about it during book club itself, so we'll see. But all you have to know for now is this book was a 5 out of 5. It was so good. There is so many twists and turns, and the whole time you're just like, oh my god, I have to find out what's happening. So this one is excellent. and I highly, highly recommend if you like psychological thrillers. It is very good. So that's pretty much all the books that we've read for book club so far. I mean, not like that's it, you know, there really were 16 books that I just talked about. But as we go far along with book club, I'll keep recording, you know, some of the videos that, about the books that we read, what we thought about them, maybe some vlogs of book club. But like I said in the beginning, if you have read any of these books and you want to comment below, please feel free to let me know what you thought of them, and maybe you can help me understand some of the ones that I didn't like so much. Maybe there's something that I was missing when I read it, who knows, it's a possibility. And like I said, any books that I didn't like, that's not to say that someone else doesn't like them. I know there's plenty of people who love a lot of the books that I wasn't a fan of, and it's just a matter of opinion and a matter of, you know, taste of books. So feel free to comment below on what you think of these books, or if you want to read any of them. Like I said, if you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. And thank you again so much for watching, and hopefully you liked this video. If you have any questions or comments about the video itself, feel free to let me know. Thanks again.